Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a simple question. What if I told you that the secret to winning at love, life, and happiness was whispered to me by a 92-year-old woman, a woman who has seen it all, felt it all, and lived long enough to tell the truths most of us miss? That's a fact, and today I'm here to share it with you. Few men know this, but after today you'll walk away wiser than most. Picture this. I was seated beside this elderly woman, her hands wrinkled, her eyes sparkling with the wisdom of nearly a century. And what she said hit me so hard I knew I had to share it. She leaned in and said, "Jessica, tell the men of today, stop chasing what fades and start building what lasts." That's it. So simple, yet so profound. And as I sat there, I realized that in this age of instant gratification, of swiping right, of shallow connections, we have forgotten what truly matters. And that's why so many men feel lost, confused, or frustrated when it comes to relationships and even their own sense of purpose. Today, I want to break this down. I want to unpack 5 timeless truths this 92-year-old woman shared, truths that can change your relationships, your mindset, and the way you move through life. These are truths that separate the boys from the men. And I promise you, if you listen closely, if you apply this wisdom, you'll stand out in a world full of confused souls. You'll be that man who commands respect, love, and loyalty not through force, not through games, but through genuine strength of character. So, stay with me. This isn't about gimmicks. This is about facts few men know, but those who do, they win. Let's dive in. Most men in today's world spend their lives chasing what fades, and that's the painful truth the 92-year-old woman shared with me, a truth too few men ever realize until it's too late. She spoke about how men pour their time, energy, and hearts into things that are temporary, chasing beauty that will eventually wrinkle, status that can be stripped away, and pleasures that satisfy only for a moment before leaving them emptier than before. The wisdom she shared is this: a man's true strength and fulfillment lie not in what he can collect or conquer temporarily, but in what he can build to last. She reminded me that when a man chases what fades, he ends up exhausted, confused, and bitter, because no matter how fast he runs or how hard he tries, those things will slip through his fingers like sand. But when a man focuses on building what lasts, whether it's his integrity, a meaningful relationship, or a purpose bigger than himself, he finds peace, stability, and deep satisfaction that no external force can take away. She told me about her own husband, a man who chose to build, not chase. He wasn't the wealthiest or most famous, but decades after his passing, people still speak his name with respect because of the love he gave, the lives he touched, and the values he stood for. This is what so many men miss in the noisy world today. They think the goal is to impress strangers, to win temporary battles, or to acquire what glitters. But the goal, the real goal, is to leave a mark that time cannot erase. And here's the fact: when a man stops chasing what fades and starts building what lasts, not only does he gain the respect of others, but he gains the most valuable treasure of all, his own self-respect. Because deep down, every man knows when he's running after shadows versus when he's building something real. The 92-year-old woman said it best: the man who builds will always outlast the man who chases. That's a fact too few men ever learn before it's too late. The second piece of wisdom the elderly woman shared was that a man's strength is not seen in his loudness, his muscles, or how many people he can dominate. It's seen in his self-control. She said she'd lived long enough to see strong men fall and quiet men rise, all because of one difference: discipline. The man who can master himself, who can say no to his impulses, who can resist the easy path in favor of the right path, is the man who will always win in the long run. She spoke of men she had known who lost everything because they couldn't control their tempers, their desires, or their tongues. Men who let lust, greed, or pride dictate their choices and ended up broken, alone, or in ruin. But she also spoke of men who were overlooked at first. Men who didn't need to shout to prove themselves. Men who could walk away from a fight, stay faithful when tempted, work hard without applause, and make decisions not based on feelings, but on values. Those were the men who built legacies. She said, "The man who can control himself can control his world." And she's right, because when you have self-control, you don't waste your life cleaning up messes you made in moments of weakness. You don't burn bridges, destroy trust, or lose opportunities because you couldn't pause and think before acting. Self-control means you choose your battles wisely, you speak with purpose, and you act with intention. It's not easy. The world today encourages men to give in to every desire, to seek instant gratification, to react without thinking. But that's the path that leads to destruction. The man who masters self-control becomes unshakable, and that's the kind of man women respect, children look up to, and communities need. That's a fact most men miss, but the wise few who live it become unstoppable. The elderly woman also spoke of the power of listening, a simple act so few men truly master, yet one that can change everything. In her 92 years, she said, the most impressive men weren't the ones who talked the most, boasted the loudest, or always had something clever to say. It was the ones who listened deeply, to their partners, to their children, to the world around them. She told me how listening is where real wisdom enters, because when a man listens, he learns. He notices details others miss. He understands before he acts, and that makes his decisions sharper, his relationships stronger, and his life smoother. She laughed gently when she said, "Most men don't hear because they're too busy planning what they'll say next." And isn't that true? In today's world, where everyone is shouting to be heard, where conversations have become competitions, the man who can simply pause and listen is rare. But that rarity is what makes him powerful, because listening gives you the advantage of knowledge. You spot red flags sooner, you sense what's unsaid, you make others feel seen and valued, and that builds trust and connection in ways words never could. The elderly woman said she'd seen marriages saved because a man finally stopped talking long enough to hear what his wife had been saying for years. She'd seen fathers heal broken bonds with their children because they chose to listen, not lecture. And she'd seen men rise in business and life because they listened to what others ignored. So few men understand this, but listening isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It takes strength to quiet your own voice so you can hear what matters. And the men who master this, they don't need to shout to lead. Their quiet understanding speaks volumes. One of the deepest truths the elderly woman shared is that a man's character is his most valuable currency. She said, all the money, looks, and charm in the world won't matter if a man's character is rotten. And how right she is. Character is what defines you when no one is watching. It's what determines whether people trust you, whether they respect you, and whether they'll stand by you in the storms of life. She told me stories of men who had everything, wealth, status, connections, but because their character was weak, they ended up alone, disgraced, or forgotten. And she spoke of men who had very little materially, but whose honesty, kindness, courage, and loyalty made them rich in ways no bank account could. In today's world, it's easy to get distracted by appearances. Social media teaches men to focus on how things look rather than how things are. But at the end of the day, people remember and honor a man for his character. The elderly woman said that a good man's name is like gold, it opens doors, it earns loyalty, it attracts the right kind of woman, and it brings peace of mind. And here's what too few men realize: character is built in small choices every day. It's built when you tell the truth even when it's hard, when you keep a promise even when it's inconvenient, when you help someone who can do nothing for you in return. Character is the foundation everything else rests on. Without it, no relationship can last, no success can satisfy, and no legacy can endure. That's a fact every man should take to heart. Another powerful lesson the 92-year-old woman gave was this: stop proving yourself to the wrong people. She said so many men waste their lives trying to impress those who don't matter. Strangers on the street, people who don't care, crowds who will cheer one day and forget you the next. She urged men to recognize whose opinion truly counts: the people who love you, the people who stand with you when you have nothing to offer, and most importantly, yourself. Because the man who constantly seeks external validation will always feel empty. No amount of applause, no number of admirers, no level of fame will ever fill the hole inside a man who doesn't respect himself. The wise man knows that the only approval he truly needs is from the person he sees in the mirror each morning. And when he has that, he stops performing for the world. He starts living with purpose, not for applause. The elderly woman told me she'd seen men ruin themselves trying to live up to other people's expectations, trying to be what others wanted rather than who they truly were. And in the end, those people they tried to impress weren't there to pick up the pieces. She said, "A man who knows his worth doesn't need the world to tell him." That's a fact too few men understand. And when a man stops trying to prove himself to the wrong people, he gains the freedom to become his best self. Finally, the elderly woman shared a truth that hit me hard: legacy matters more than popularity. She said the men who made the biggest difference in her long life weren't the most popular or the most celebrated. They were the men who quietly built something that lasted beyond themselves. Popularity fades. The cheers stop. The spotlight moves on, but legacy endures. Legacy is what people remember you for long after you're gone. It's the lessons you taught, the lives you touched, the goodness you spread. The wise man understands this and lives accordingly. He invests in people, not just possessions. He thinks about how his choices today will affect tomorrow. He plants seeds that he may never see bloom, but that future generations will benefit from. That's the man who truly wins. The elderly woman said, "At my age, I don't remember the men who were the most popular. I remember the men who made a difference." And that's what so many men today have forgotten. In the race for likes, followers, and fame, they've neglected what truly matters. But the few who focus on legacy over popularity, they are the ones who live meaningful lives, loved and respected long after they're gone. That's a fact few men know. But those who do, those are the men who change the world.